Why is there no snow in Solitude? Cities on the same latitude in Skyrim, like Dawnstar and Winterhold, are freezing with blizzardy weather. If you're an amazing geography wizard, the answer might seem easy, but let's go into exactly what's going on, why it looks like there's steam coming out of these rivers, and why the developers might have paid close attention to real climate systems to design this world. And we'll talk about those towers while we're at it. The first thing you might notice is that Solitude is geographically situated behind a snowy mountain range. You might be familiar with the mountain shadow effect, where steep mountains collect moisture and make the other side a little drier and warmer. But this might tell us a little more than you might think. We can assume, for instance, that weather exposure might be coming from this general direction because of the angle where we see snow form, and seem to leave the other side less affected. Using this, we can compare it to other coastlines in Skyrim to see that the developers are anything if not consistent. Solstheim has a similar snow covering to Skyrim's northwest coast, which can, believe it or not, also explain this area. If onshore wind is heading in this direction, its main force will easily miss Solitude and the swamps due to mountain coverage. When it hits the Pale and Winterhold, it continues through the mountains, and cold air gets trapped in these valleys, influencing the surrounding environment. Now, this is not de jure rule for how snow accumulates on coastlines. Wind directions are changing all the time on Earth. Actually, rain clouds on Earth will never come directly from cold fronts north of Arctic coastlines. Cold air is dry, actually. Arctic precipitation requires warmer offshore winds converging with colder ones. I've chosen two possible real-world counterparts that might best demonstrate Tamriel's weather systems on Skyrim. You can see here on Alaska's northern shore, we can skip through the days, but every time we see the precipitation accumulation, we can pretty much always track it from a point where warmer air came into contact with colder air currents. Here, we can watch a cloud form from warmer airflow coming from the south. A couple hours later, it starts to die on its journey north. Then warm air currents push harder through the Bering Sea a few hours later, interacting with the cold air currents, resurrecting the rain clouds into something far greater before eventually killing it off in the dry cold. This is just a way to show you how weather systems might behave on Tamriel. The way rain clouds are able to form in a continental curvature like this can tell us a lot about Skyrim's climate. You can see that coastal weather like this in the north actually requires a warmer current to exist from the south. So on Nirn, we're talking about places like warmer Hammerfell or possibly Yokuda, giving us coastal weather when winds go in that direction. The next real-world region we can look at is Scandinavia, the real inspiration for the Nords, much closer to Skyrim in the way that the mountains and fjords are frequently touching the coast. The similarities to Tamriel after that are a little striking when you think about it. Check out the warm fronts coming all the way from the Mediterranean climates, merging with northern Arctic air. Suddenly, Britain's gloomy weather is making sense. The same pattern persists though. A warm front must persist on a cold one in order for precipitation to accumulate and eventually hit the coastline. So wind directions change all the time. But if we switch to ocean currents and go through the days, the months, we'll see that ocean currents have a general, reliable direction that they'll go in. They might shift once in a while, but this general trend can help evenly distribute temperatures around the globe, and when winds at certain directions interact with them, land environments get affected by them too. So, what's the point of studying all this? Well, let's start looking at Solitude now with all this in mind. We can show that these northern snowy weather systems in Alaska and Scandinavia can be mirrored to Skyrim and are not only stemmed from warm currents, but are mostly barriered by Skyrim's mountains. This completely explains a drier Solitude and the rest of Skyrim for that matter. So that's not to say winds from southern Skyrim can't generate some rain now and then, but the scarcity of frozen storms in Arctic air here will seldom make snow possible. So there are some really cool fan maps out there speculating possible climate systems in Tamriel, including this one with ocean current speculation and Köppen climate classification by Reddit user Zantander. You can take what you will with these maps, but ultimately in order for Solitude to realistically be devoid of snow in the way that it is, we have to hypothesize 2 points. Number 1, the mountain range in northeast Skyrim is blocking a significant amount of weather and moisture, which as we've just proved, precipitation from here must be coming from warmer equatorial climates, and since Skyrim is surrounded by mountains, most moisture will be generated from these oceans. Number 2, When wind does travel from other directions, it'll be coming from either warmer climates in Tamriel, or from the direction of Morrowind or at Mora. Now the latter would usually be a strike against a warm Solitude, but we might be able to fantasize even further and involve that river. Now, river runoff usually just helps to shape the landscape around it and provide nutrients for the estuaries, but if there's a significant temperature difference, it can absolutely affect ocean temperature, which might influence the wind temperature just enough. I'm going to go all the way down this river and look for answers. The first fork has water coming from two general directions, Whiterun and Markarth. The Markarth side has rivers cutting through deep mountain valleys and waterfalls stemming from snowy cliffs, usually a sign of cold water. The big one, however, comes from the city of Markarth itself. Coming from steep, impassable mountain cliffs, I'd wager the water temperature isn't very warm here, but the dwarves built a massive city, so maybe there's some volcanic hot spring collusion in there. The Whiterun side of the river heads toward a warmer, open climate. We still have waters coming from places with names like Chillwind Depths, but as we keep going upstream, you'll see browner grasses, a sign of planned dormancy. We'll start to see some shallower sources, and a phenomenon you're sure to have noticed. It looks like steam coming out of these waters, but it's probably not boiling water. It's actually a common phenomenon that happens when running water is just warmer than outside air, kind of like when you blow air out of your mouth on a cold day. This is a pretty good sign for telling us that the river flowing out of Solitude could safely be even a little warmer than the sea it flows into. So there's a third point to talk about actually, and it has to do with these things called the towers. This topic warrants its own video, but in summary, the towers were created by the Merithic elves at specific focal points around Tamriel, and in theory would respond to the desires of those who claim them. One source, coming from the Elder Scrolls Online, uses this to explain Cyrodiil's mysterious shift from wild jungle to a tame magic forest, which would mean each governing race would have probably done the same. There's not a lot of official stuff on this though, even on the towers themselves. A lot on this topic is surrounded by speculation. I'd be interested to see if they expand upon tower lore in the future, but the mystery is kinda cool. Before we close, I'd like to raise up some contradictory pieces to think about with all this. For one, there's this thing that Skyrim might just look the way it does based on the month at the start of the game, which is the 17th of last seed, or in other words, the middle of August. If the developers had implemented seasons into the game, we might expect Solitude and even temperate parts of Skyrim to be covered in snow. And in case you're wondering, we do have a mechanical source for wind direction in Skyrim, but it's when rain and blizzardy weather blow east. Always. It never changes direction, which would be another score for a warm Solitude, but I'm going to cast this aside as developer forgiveness. If you'd like to learn more about my research for this video, check out the links below or leave a question or comment. I'd love to chat about this topic. There are a lot more deductions we can make about Tamriel's climate as a whole by simply observing the world, and this only scratches the surface. In the meantime, stay curious and see you next time.